My name is Ryan Coleman, and I live in Columbus, Ohio, where I work as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex downtown. I met my wife Danielle 6 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue, and from the start she made me feel like the luckiest man alive. She had this easy laugh that made strangers smile, and she worked as a dental hygienist just a few miles from our house. We got married after 2 years of dating, bought a small brick home on the east side, and settled into a life that felt steady and good. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Danielle wanted kids badly, and so did I, so when she told me she was pregnant after almost a year of trying, I cried right there in the kitchen. I painted the nursery a soft yellow because we didn't want to know the gender ahead of time. I picked up extra shifts to save for a crib and a car seat. My mother, Linda, kept sending me articles about first-time fathers, and my brother Dean joked that I'd be the type to read bedtime stories before the baby could even open its eyes. Danielle seemed just as excited, maybe more. She talked about baby names every night at dinner, she rubbed her belly during movies, and she let me press my hand against her stomach to feel the first kicks. I trusted her completely. I had no reason not to. We were a normal couple building a normal life, and I believed nothing could shake that foundation. I was wrong, and I just didn't know it yet. The delivery day came in early spring, and I stood by Danielle's side for 11 hours, holding her hand through every contraction. When our daughter was born, I felt something break open in my chest, something warm and overwhelming. I named her Sophie, after my grandmother, and Danielle agreed without hesitation. For 2 days everything felt perfect. Nurses came in and out, family visited, and I held Sophie for hours, memorizing the shape of her tiny fingers. Then, on the morning we were supposed to be discharged, a pediatrician named Dr. Harmon walked in with a folder in his hand and a strange, careful look on his face. He asked to speak with both of us privately. Danielle's face went pale before he even said a word. He explained that during a routine newborn screening, they had checked blood types for medical records, and something didn't add up. My blood type was O positive. Danielle's was A positive. Sophie's blood type came back AB. He said, calmly but clearly, that biologically, a father with O positive blood could not produce a child with A blood, no matter what the mother's type was. I remember laughing nervously, thinking it was some kind of lab error. That has to be a mistake, I said. Dr. Harmon shook his head gently and said mistakes happen, but this particular pattern was a hard biological rule, not a probability. I turned to Danielle, expecting her to laugh too, expecting her to back me up. Instead she stared at the blanket on the hospital bed, and her hands started shaking. Danielle, I said, my voice cracking, tell him he's wrong. She didn't answer right away, and that silence told me more than any words could have. Dr. Harmon quietly stepped out to give us privacy, and the second the door clicked shut, I asked her again, this time barely above a whisper. Is there something you need to tell me? She finally looked up, tears streaming down her face, and said, I didn't think it would matter. I thought she was yours. I felt my whole body go numb. Yours? How? Whose else could she be? I asked, and my voice came out louder than I intended. She admitted there had been one night, months before we found out she was pregnant, when she ran into an old co-worker named Marcus at a work conference in Cleveland. She swore it was a one-time thing, a mistake she regretted instantly, and she said she convinced herself the timing meant the baby was mine. I sat there holding my newborn daughter, the daughter I had already fallen completely in love with, while my wife confessed that she might not even know who the father was. You let me name her. You let me hold her for 2 days thinking she was mine, I said, and Danielle just kept repeating that she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt me, that she really believed it in her heart. But belief doesn't change biology, and it definitely doesn't undo 2 days of lies. I left the hospital that afternoon in a fog, drove around Columbus for almost 3 hours without any real direction, and finally called my mother because I didn't know who else to talk to. When I told Linda what happened, she went quiet for a long moment, then said something I didn't expect. "Ryan, are you sure you're not overreacting? Babies bring out a lot of stress, maybe you should think about Sophie before you think about yourself." I felt my stomach drop. My own mother, the woman who raised me to value honesty above almost everything, was telling me to prioritize staying calm over the fact that my wife had hidden a possible affair from me for 9 months. My brother Dean wasn't much better. He told me that plenty of marriages survive worse, and that walking away from a newborn, biological or not, would make me look like the bad guy to everyone who mattered. Even a few friends I trusted seemed more concerned with keeping the peace than acknowledging what Danielle had done. I felt completely alone, standing in the middle of a situation nobody around me wanted to fully face. For the next week, I stayed in a spare room at Dean's apartment, unable to look at Danielle without feeling my chest tighten. She texted constantly, asking to talk, saying she loved me, saying Sophie needed her father. Every message felt like pressure instead of comfort. I started having trouble sleeping, replaying the delivery room over and over, remembering how certain I felt holding Sophie for the first time, and how quickly that certainty turned into confusion and grief. I loved a baby who might not share my blood, and I hated a wife who let me believe a lie for 9 months. Both of those feelings sat in my chest at the same time, and neither one made the other easier to carry. One night, sitting alone in Dean's guest room, I finally admitted to myself that this wasn't about proving a point or punishing Danielle. This was about figuring out what kind of life I actually wanted, and what kind of father I wanted to be, regardless of a blood test. I decided I needed real answers, not assumptions, not guilt trips from family, and not vague promises from Danielle. I called a lawyer the next morning and asked about paternity testing, custody rights, and what my options looked like no matter which way the results came back. That phone call was the turning point. For the first time since the hospital, I felt like I was making a decision instead of just reacting to one. The paternity test came back 2 weeks later, and it confirmed what the hospital already suspected. Sophie was not biologically mine. Marcus was. I sat with that information for a long time, staring at a piece of paper that seemed to rewrite my entire future. But somewhere in those 2 weeks of waiting, I had already made peace with the hard truth. Biology didn't decide whether I loved that little girl. I decided that when I held her in the hospital, and nothing on a lab report could take that back. I met with Danielle and told her clearly that I couldn't stay married to someone who let me build a life on a lie, even if that lie wasn't intentional at first. I told her I still wanted to be part of Sophie's life, not because I had to, but because I chose to. We worked out an arrangement through lawyers, something calm and respectful instead of bitter, where I could remain present as a father figure while she and Marcus figured out their own responsibilities. My mother eventually apologized for her first reaction, admitting she spoke out of fear instead of thinking it through. Dean came around too, once he saw how much effort I put into staying in Sophie's life despite everything. It wasn't the ending I imagined the day I painted that nursery yellow, but it became an ending I could live with, one built on honesty instead of illusion. Sophie is 2 years old now, and she still calls me daddy every time I pick her up, and every single time, I choose her all over again.